Acteon, in retelling it, told it otherwise. He maintained that Artemis had in fact requested his presence, alone, and that far from catching any furtive glance of her divine ablutions, he had had a perfectly unobstructed view of her, because she had pinned his eyes open and tied him to a tree. There before him she danced and growled and took shapes so hideous that a tiny sound as of breaking glass was emitted from each after the other of his eyes. What transpired then, he said, transpired in darkness. The cords were loosened, and I felt my hands and feet harden and my skull sprout horns. As for running, I ask you, how could a blind stag run through those woods?
Once upon a time when they were walking together, they saw a man selling oranges in the metro and decided, later, that it might be important for at least one of them to remember that once upon a time when they had walked together, hand in hand, they had seen a man selling oranges in the metro in case they decided, later, that it might have been important to have done so, together, to have done or seen something together, once.
In X's retelling of Hansel and Gretel, the line of breadcrumbs Hansel and Gretel lay are not laid down in a forest. They are laid each into the other's sleeping mind. There is no witch in X's retelling. There is no oven, and there are no hungry birds. There are only the breadcrumbs leading from Hansel's skull into Gretel's, from Gretel's skull into Hansel's. The crumbs are so small and distantly placed that in those great blank dreaming spaces, they quickly become impossible to find.
Chumba kilikuwa safi isivyoaminika, usafi utoshao kuvunja moyo. Tendo lote lililotendeka mle awali halikuonekana tena kamwe.
Bede then held forth on the subject of the Emperor Hadrian, for whom the wall was named. He said it was written that after a particularly fierce battle, Hadrian ordered rings drawn around all the corpses, Roman and Caledonian combined. His officers, in accordance with his will, filled 100 goatskin bags, 50 with black ash, 50 with iron oxide. After each ring was made, the corresponding corpse was removed. When Hadrian made his inspection the next day, he found that more than 3/4 of the rings were overlapping. And, if one paid close attention, remarked Hadrian in writing of the incident near his death, it became clear that each ring, no matter how far removed it was from the others, was, by some aspect of those others, implied. Bede then went on to say that it had since been shown that Hadrian had made no such inspection, that, in fact, Hadrian had been nowhere near Caledonia at the time of the presumptive battle, that there was, in fact, some doubt as to whether such a battle had, within the posited time frame, occurred at all. What was clear, Bede said, was that 1, Hadrian was near death at the time he wrote of the hypothetical incident, and that 2, at the bottom of the remarks in question, in a barely legible hand, one that bore even greater signs of his rapidly advancing pleurisy, he had written, "Wrong, wrong, wrong, wrong."